The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the dim glow of streetlights, casting a moody haze over the quiet suburb where my life unraveled. I'm Emma Carter, and 3 years ago I made a split-second choice that cost me everything. My husband, James Carter, a rising star in contemporary dance, was crossing the street with me, his arm casually looping through mine. We were headed to a rare date night at the local cinema, a treat after months of his grueling rehearsal schedule. The air smelled of wet pavement and pine, and for a moment I felt like we were the couple we used to be before the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the distance that had crept between us. Then I saw a white SUV barreling toward us, its headlights cutting through the drizzle like knives. The driver's face was unmistakable even in that fleeting moment, Victoria Lane James's high school sweetheart, the woman he'd once called the one who got away. Her eyes were locked on him, not the road, her expression a mix of longing and something darker, something I couldn't name. Time slowed. My heart pounded. Without thinking, I shoved James out of the way with every ounce of strength. The SUV slammed into me, instead the impact a deafening roar of metal and pain. My body crumpled and the world went black. I woke in a hospital bed, or rather, I didn't wake. My body lay still, trapped in a vegetative state, a prisoner in my own flesh. Tubes and monitors kept me alive, but I was gone until I wasn't. In that limbo, I heard everything, the doctor's grim prognoses, the nurse's pitying whispers, and worst of all, James's voice. He stood by my bedside, his tone flat as he spoke to his lawyer. "She's not coming back," he said. "Let's move on." Move on? I'd given him everything, my love, my savings, my dreams, and he was ready to discard me like a broken prop. In court, James did the unthinkable. He stood before the judge, his charming eyes brimming with crocodile tears, and forgave Victoria on my behalf. Emma wanted compassion, so he lied, his voice smooth as silk. Victoria, the woman who'd stolen my life, walked free. Not a week later, James slipped into my hospital room under the cover of night. I couldn't see him, but I felt the shift in the air and his presence's coldness. His fingers brushed the oxygen tube, keeping me alive. A pause, then a tug. The monitor screamed, but I was already fading, my spirit clawing at the edges of existence. He didn't hesitate. He didn't cry. He just walked away. I died that night, my heart shattered not by the accident, but by the man I'd loved. James married Victoria within months, using the money I'd saved over years of sacrifice to buy them a sleek condo in downtown Seattle. They had a child, a boy he bragged to friends, though I'd later learn a bitter truth about that child. My spirit lingered invisible, watching as they built a life on my ruins. I was nothing to them, a footnote in their twisted fairy tale. But fate, or something greater, wasn't done with me. As I hovered in that purgatory, a warmth enveloped me, a voice whispering through the void. Your sacrifice demands justice. Live again. It wasn't God, not exactly, but a cosmic force, a balance that saw my pain and offered me a second chance. Light flooded my senses, and I gasped awake, my body whole, standing on that same rain-soaked street. The date was the same, October 10th, 2022. The cinema marquee glowed in the distance. James was beside me, his voice impatient. "Emma, come on, the movie's starting soon." The SUV's headlights were already rounding the corner. I froze, my pulse racing. Victoria's face came into view, her eyes fixed on James as before. This time I didn't move. I didn't push him. My hands stayed at my sides, my heart a furnace of rage. This was my rebirth, my chance to rewrite the story. I wouldn't save him again. I'd let them both burn. If you're gripped by this tale of betrayal and second chances, join our community of storytellers. Hit that like button to show your support, comment with your thoughts. Maybe you've faced a betrayal like Emma's, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that dive deep into the human heart. Your engagement fuels our passion for sharing these journeys. So let's keep the conversation going. The Seattle rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and betrayal. I stood rooted to the sidewalk, James's voice still echoing in my ears. "Emma, hurry up." But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the life I'd lost, the truth I'd uncovered in that ghostly limbo between death and rebirth. James Carter wasn't the man I'd married. He was a facade, a charming mask, hiding a heart as cold as the Puget Sound in winter. And I'd been blind to it, pouring my soul into a marriage that was a lie. In our past life, I'd watched from beyond as James knelt at my grave, his sobs loud enough to fool anyone. For a fleeting moment, I thought he felt guilt, a shred of remorse for what he'd done. Then he spoke, and my illusion shattered. "Thank you, Emma," he whispered, his voice thick with relief. "Your accident set me free. It brought me back to Victoria, my true love." True love. The words were a knife twisting in the wound of his betrayal. He thanked me for dying, for clearing the path to his happiness. My spirit raged, weightless but burning yearning to claw the truth from his lips. I'd given James everything. When we met, he was a struggling dance instructor, his dreams of national fame stalled by a string of bad breaks. His high school sweetheart, Victoria Lane, had dumped him years earlier for a tech mogul in Silicon Valley, leaving him broken. I was the one who picked up the pieces. We lived in a cramped studio apartment, surviving on instant noodles and thrift store coffee. I worked double shifts at a marketing firm, funneling every spare dollar into his dance studio. I believed in him, in us. I thought we'd made it when he finally landed a teaching gig at a prestigious Seattle Arts Academy. I thought we were a team, but James never saw me as his equal. On my 30th birthday, I treated myself to a $50 lipstick, a rare splurge. His face darkened as he snatched the receipt. Wasteful, he muttered loud enough for the cashier to hear. "Who spends like that?" I shrank under his gaze, believing I didn't deserve it. Now reborn, I saw the truth. It wasn't about the money. It was about me. He didn't think I was worth it. Every "I love you" was a performance, a line delivered to keep me tethered while he pined for Victoria. Victoria Lane wasn't just his ex. She was his obsession, a ghost he never exorcised. Raised by a single mother after a messy divorce, she'd learned early to use her beauty to climb social ladders. She and James were the golden couple in high school, but when a richer prospect came along, she left him without a backward glance. I'd heard the stories and seen the photos he kept hidden in a shoebox, Victoria in a prom dress, her smile radiant, her eyes promising a future he couldn't let go. He never stopped comparing me to her after she returned to Seattle, broke and humbled. I was the safe choice, the reliable one, while she was the spark he craved. In that past life after my death, James and Victoria's life seemed perfect. They moved into a sleek condo funded by my savings. They had a son or so, James thought. I'd overheard whispers in my comatose state, Victoria's voice trembling as she confessed to a friend, "The kid's not his. It's Mike's." Mike, her ex from California, the one she'd left James for. She'd lied to James, letting him raise another man's child, all while draining my legacy. The betrayal wasn't just James's. It was hers, too, a calculated move to secure her place in his life. Standing on that Seattle sidewalk, the weight of those truths anchored me. The SUV's engine roared closer, Victoria's face sharp in the headlights. James tugged at my arm, oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. "Emma, what's wrong? Move," he snapped, his charming eyes narrowing. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who'd killed me without a second thought. The cosmic force that brought me back hadn't just given me life. It had given me clarity. I wouldn't save him. I wouldn't repeat my mistakes. This time I'd rewrite the ending, starting with letting Victoria's car do what it was meant to do. The Seattle night was alive with the hum of distant traffic and the patter of rain on asphalt, but my world had narrowed to the glare of headlights cutting through the drizzle. Emma Carter, stood frozen on the sidewalk, my husband, James Carter, tugging at my arm. "Emma, move, the movie's starting." His voice carried the familiar edge of impatience I'd once mistaken for passion. But I wasn't the same Emma anymore. The cosmic force that had pulled me back from death's grip, granting me a second chance for my sacrifice, had stripped away my illusions. I knew who James was, a man who'd traded my life for his happiness and pulled my oxygen tube without a tear. And now fate allowed me to let him taste his own betrayal. The white SUV roared closer, its engine a low growl that vibrated in my chest. Victoria Lane's face was unmistakable behind the wheel, her eyes locked on James, with a hunger that made my stomach churn. In my past life, I'd shoved him out of the way, taking the hit that left me comatose. I'd been a fool, believing his love was worth my sacrifice. Not this time. My hands stayed at my sides, my feet rooted to the pavement. James's grip tightened, his charming eyes narrowing with confusion. "Emma, what the hell's wrong with you?" He snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through the rain. I met his gaze, my own eyes cold as the October air. "Nothing's wrong," I said softly, a faint smile tugging at my lips, and just watching. The words were barely out when the SUV slammed into him. The impact was a symphony of chaos metal, screeching tires, squealing, and James's scream piercing the night as his body flew through the air. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, the tires rolling over his legs with a crunch that echoed in my ears. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the rain, his dancer's body broken beyond repair. Bystanders gasped, some rushing forward, others fumbling for their phones to call 911. Victoria stumbled out of the SUV, her face pale, her hands shaking as she stared at James writhing on the ground. "Oh my God, James," she cried, her voice trembling with shock, and something else, guilt maybe, or fear. I stood still, my heart a furnace of rage and satisfaction. This was the sound of justice, the first note I'd composed for them both in the Requiem. The man who'd killed me was now at the mercy of the woman he'd chosen over me. Poetic. Paramedics arrived, their sirens slicing through the chaos. They worked quickly, stabilizing James as he groaned, his face contorted in agony. I stepped forward, playing the part of the concerned wife, my voice steady as I answered their questions. He didn't see the car. I lied, my eyes flicking to Victoria. She avoided my gaze, her hands wringing the hem of her jacket. The paramedics loaded James into the ambulance, and I followed, my mind racing with possibilities. In my past life, I'd been the one broken, discarded. Now it was his turn to lose everything. At the hospital, the sterile scent of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lights brought back memories of my own death. I sat in the waiting room, my hands folded neatly in my lap while doctors worked to save James. A nurse approached, her expression grim. "Mrs. Carter, your husband's legs are severely damaged. We're doing everything we can, but—" She trailed off, her eyes full of pity. I nodded, my face a mask of concern, but I felt a spark of triumph inside. James's legs, his pride, the foundation of his dance career, were gone. Victoria had taken them just as he'd taken my life. As I waited, a memory surfaced from my comatose state in that past life. Victoria's voice, low and panicked, whispering to a friend in my hospital room, "The kid's not James's, it's Mike's, if he finds out." The words had been a faint echo, then drowned by the haze of my fading consciousness. Now they rang clear. James thought he'd built a family with Victoria, but even that was a lie. She'd played him just as he'd played me. I tucked the memory away, a weapon for later. For now I had a role to play, the devoted wife, the grieving partner. But every step I took was a step toward their destruction. The hospital's intensive care unit was a maze of beeping monitors and hushed voices, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. James lay in a bed, tubes snaking from his arms, his face pale and drawn. The doctors had stabilized him, but the news wasn't good. Mrs. Carter, the lead surgeon, said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he had to tell me. "Your husband's legs are beyond saving. The damage is too severe, multiple fractures, crushed tissue, and compromised blood flow. Amputation is the only way to save his life." I nodded slowly, my expression carefully composed, shock sorrow, the perfect picture of a wife facing a nightmare. Inside, my heart sang a different tune. James, the man who'd pulled my oxygen tube without a second thought, was about to lose the one thing he valued above all else, his ability to dance. His legs had carried him to local fame, earning him awards and admiration as a contemporary dance instructor in Seattle's vibrant arts scene. He'd treated them like sacred relics, pampering them with my expensive creams while dismissing my small indulgences. Now they were nothing but wreckage. "Amputation," I repeated, my voice soft but firm. From the thigh down, the surgeon hesitated, glancing at his clipboard. "That's the recommendation, yes. It's the safest option to prevent infection and ensure his survival." I met his eyes, letting a single tear fall for effect. "Do whatever it takes to save him," I said, my tone earnest. "Even if it means going higher waist level if necessary, please save my husband." Surprised by my specificity, the surgeon blinked, but nodded and walked away to prep for surgery. I signed the consent form with a steady hand, the pen gliding across the paper like a blade. In my past life, James had chosen to end me, his fingers cold on the tube that tethered me to life. Now I mirrored his ruthlessness, signing away his future without a flicker of doubt. The irony was exquisite. Victoria's reckless driving had delivered this blow, and I was merely sealing the deal. James would wake to a world where his stage was gone, his dreams crushed as surely as his bones. As I waited for the surgery to finish, I paced the hospital corridor, my mind mapping out the next steps. James and I co-owned a media company built on my capital and connections. It was a thriving business, managing artists and producing dance showcases that had elevated James's profile. He'd moved to choreography after his teaching success, but I was the one who'd secured the initial gigs, drinking myself sick at networking events to land him opportunities. The company was my legacy, not his, and I intended to claim it. A nurse interrupted my thoughts, her face gentle. Mrs. Carter, the surgery went well. Your husband's stable, but he'll need extensive recovery. I thanked her, my smile practiced, and returned to James's bedside. He was still unconscious, his body diminished without the legs that had defined him. I leaned close, whispering so only he could hear, though he wouldn't. You took my life, James. Now I'm taking yours. My voice was a vow, a promise to the cosmic force that had reborn me. I'd play the devoted wife a little longer, but every move was a step toward dismantling the life he'd stolen from me. The hospital room grew quiet, and the only sound was the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. I thought of Victoria out there somewhere, probably racked with guilt or plotting her next move. Her past loomed in my mind, raised by a struggling single mother. She'd learned to charm her way to comfort, leaving James for a richer man, only to return when her prospects dimmed. She'd used that charm to worm her way back into James's life, and I'd heard her confess the truth about their child. That secret and her betrayal would be my leverage. For now, I'd let James wake to his new reality and feel the weight of his loss. The stage was set, and I was ready to direct the fall. The Seattle hospital was a sterile fortress of white walls and antiseptic air, but to me it was a battlefield. James Carter, my husband, or rather, the man who'd killed me in my past life, lay in his recovery room, his face gaunt against the starched pillow. The amputation had taken both his legs from the thighs down a brutal end to the dance career that had defined him. The cosmic force that reborn me, granting a second chance for my sacrifice, whispered in my veins, this was justice's opening act. But I wasn't done. To reclaim what was mine, I had to play a part I knew all too well. The devoted wife, the saintly caregiver, while I maneuvered to seize control of our shared media company. Each morning I arrived at James's bedside with a thermos of homemade chicken soup, its warmth starkly contrasting to my heart's cold resolve. I fed him carefully, my hands steady as I wiped his chin, my voice soft with false concern. You need to eat, James, I murmured, noting how his eyes flickered with gratitude and suspicion. He was moody, his temper flaring at the most minor things, a dropped spoon, a nurse's delay. Once he hurled a water cup across the room, its plastic clattering against the wall. I'm useless now, he shouted, his voice cracking. I knelt to clean the spill, hiding my satisfaction. His despair was my leverage. At home, I cooked his favorite dishes, braised short ribs, creamy mashed potatoes, burning my hands on the stove to ensure the blisters were visible. When he noticed, his eyes softened. Emma, how'd you hurt yourself? He asked, his voice almost tender. It's nothing, I replied, holding up my bandaged hands with a faint smile. I don't care about a few burns as long as you're eating. The lie was effortless, and it worked. James ate heartily that night, his guilt making him pliable. I savored the irony in my past life. He'd used my love to drain me dry. Now I used his dependence to tighten my grip. Our media company, Carter Creative, was the real prize. Built on my capital and connections, it managed a roster of artists, dancers, actors, musicians who performed in showcases and commercials across the Pacific Northwest. I'd poured years into it, networking late into the night, securing gigs for James when he was just a struggling instructor. Now, with him bedridden, I returned to the office as acting CEO. The staff welcomed me, their loyalty rooted in my early days of tireless hustle. I met with our top artists, listening to their concerns and promising stability. We're a family, I told them, my voice warm but calculated. We'll get through this together. James, confined to his hospital bed, had no idea I was consolidating power. I visited daily, updating him with enough company news to keep him calm. Everything's running smoothly, omitting how I'd renegotiate contracts to favor my authority. I leaned on my old connections, producers, sponsors, even a retired choreographer I'd once begged to mentor James. They trusted me, not him. Each handshake, each signed deal was a brick in the wall I was building between James and the empire we'd created. One evening, as I adjusted his blanket, James grabbed my wrist, his grip weak but desperate. Emma, you're all I have left, he said, his eyes searching mine. I forced a smile, my heart cold. I'm here, James, I replied, the words a mask for the truth. I was here to take everything. In my past life, I'd married Victoria Lane, my high school sweetheart, using my savings to fund their life. He'd raised a child he thought was his, unaware of Victoria's whispered confession in my comatose state. The kid's not his. It's Mike's. That secret was a blade I'd wield later. For now, I played my role, knowing every act of devotion brought me closer to dismantling his world. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat by James's bed, scrolling through company emails on my phone. The door burst open, and Victoria Lane stormed in her designer heels, clicking against the linoleum. Once radiant in the photos James kept hidden, her face was now pinched with panic. "James, please," she said, ignoring me as she threw herself at his bedside. "Please don't sue me." "It was an accident." Her voice trembled, but her eyes darted to me, calculating. I leaned back, my expression neutral, but I was a coiled spring ready to strike inside. Victoria's past was no mystery to me. Raised in Tacoma by a single mother after her parents' bitter divorce, she'd learned early to use her charm to escape hardship. She and James were inseparable in high school, the golden couple of their small-town dance scene. But when a tech mogul offered her a ticket to Silicon Valley, she dumped James without hesitation, chasing wealth over love. She returned to Seattle years later, her dreams of luxury dashed her beauty, her only currency. In my past life, she'd manipulated James back into her orbit, using my death to secure her place. Now she was at it again, pleading for mercy after running him over. I'd already acted. While James was in surgery, I'd called the police and hired a lawyer to press charges against Victoria for reckless driving. The demand $250,000 in compensation for James's injuries. She knew it was my doing, her lawyer had the documents, but she came to James, not me, banking on his lingering feelings. "I didn't mean to hit you," she sobbed, clutching his hand. "I'm broke, James. My mom's sick, and I've got nothing." Her tears were a performance one I'd seen in my past life when she'd cried to him about my accident, melting his heart until he pulled my oxygen tube. James's face softened, his eyes torn between pain and pity. "Victoria, He started, his voice weak. I cut in my tone, icy. "Miss Lane, you turned my husband into a double amputee. Pay the $250,000 or we'll see you in court." She flinched, her sob catching in her throat. "I don't have that kind of money," she said, her voice small. "I can pay $500 a month, my mom's medical bills." I laughed, sharp and cold. "At that rate, it'll take 300 years. "Are you serious?" I leaned forward, my eyes boring into hers. "Pay it all or face the consequences." Victoria's gaze flickered to James, pleading silently. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his loyalty wavering under my stare. In my past life, he'd forgiven her, married her, built a life on my stolen savings. He'd raised a child he thought was his blind to her confession about her ex, Mike. Now I saw the same weakness in him, the same pull toward her, but I wasn't the naive Emma anymore. The cosmic force that brought me back had sharpened my edges, turned my love into a weapon. "James," I said, my voice soft but firm. "She destroyed your life. Don't let her off easy." He looked away, his hands trembling. Victoria stood, her face a mix of humiliation and defiance. "I'll find a way," she muttered, then turned and left, her heels echoing down the hall. I watched her go, knowing this was only the beginning. She'd try to worm her way back into James's heart just as before. But I was ready. I'd overheard her secrets in my comatose state, and I'd used them to ensure she paid for every lie. For now, I turned back to James, adjusting his pillow gently. "Rest," I said, my smile a mask. "I'll handle everything." And I would start to. Victoria's tears didn't save her this time. The Seattle skyline glittered through the hospital window, starkly contrasting the sterile gloom of James Carter's recovery room. Emma Carter sat by his bedside, my face a carefully crafted mask of concern, but my mind was a battlefield. The cosmic force that had reborn me for my sacrifice, granting me a second chance to right James's wrongs, urged me forward. His legs were gone, amputated after Victoria Lane's SUV crushed them, and with them his dance career. But I wasn't done. My goal was Carter Creative, the media company I'd built with sweat and savings, and I'd do whatever it took to claim it. For now, I played the devoted wife, but every move was a step toward exposing James's true nature. James was a shadow of himself, his once charming eyes dulled by pain and medication. He'd grown erratic, snapping at nurses one moment, clinging to my hand the next. "Emma, you're all I've got," he whispered, his voice trembling. I'd nod, stroking his hair, but I thought about the private investigator I'd hired. I'd suspected James and Victoria were rekindling their old flame, and I needed proof. In my past life, they'd married after my death, living off my money, raising a child James thought was his. In my comatose state, I'd overheard Victoria's confession, "The kid's not his, it's Mike's." That secret was my ace, but I needed to bury them both more. The investigator delivered late one night, his email pinging my phone as I left the hospital. Attached were photos, crystal clear shots of James and Victoria in a motel room, their bodies tangled, her lips on his. My stomach churned, not with hurt but with triumph. This was the evidence I needed. I contacted a friend at a local gossip blog, leaking the photos with a carefully worded story. Renowned dance instructor James Carter caught cheating with ex-girlfriend who crippled him. By morning, the internet was ablaze. Social media posts branded James a heartless cheater, me the tragic wife. The narrative flipped, and I was no longer the fool who died for him. I was the victim, wronged but strong. At Carter Creative, I used the scandal to solidify my control. The news shook the company's artists, many of whom I'd recruited. I called a meeting, standing before them in our sleek downtown office. "I know you've seen the headlines," I said, my voice steady, but laced with pain. "But we're stronger than one man's betrayal. I'm here to lead us forward." Their nods were hesitant at first, but I had a plan to win their loyalty. Our top artist, Sean Miller, had been targeted by a rival agency with a fabricated scandal, leaked photos suggesting a same-sex affair. Still bedridden, James urged me to cut Sean loose to protect the company's image. I refused. "Sean's innocent," I told the team, my eyes meeting his. "I'll prove it." I worked tirelessly, tracking down security footage that showed the photos were staged. When I presented the evidence, the artists rallied behind me, clearing Sean's name. Sean, a lanky actor with a quick smile, gripped my hand after the meeting. "You didn't give up on me, Emma. We've got your back." His loyalty and that of the others was a weapon I'd wield against James. The scandal had painted me a saint, and I intended to use that halo to blind him. Back at the hospital, James's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. He fumbled to silence it, his face pale as he saw the trending headlines. "Emma, it's not what it looks like." He stammered, his eyes wide with panic. I tilted my head, my smile cold. "You got caught in bed with her, James. What's there to explain?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I was set up," he insisted, his voice desperate. "The photos are fake." I let him squirm, knowing he was lying. In my past life, he'd hidden his affair until after my death. Now I'd exposed it, and the world was watching. The affair's fallout gave me the upper hand at Carter Creative. I renegotiated contracts, tying artists to my leadership, not James's. I leaned on my old connections, producers, sponsors, even a retired choreographer who'd mentored James at my urging. They saw me as the company's heart, not him. James, still recovering, had no idea how far my influence had spread. I visited him daily, playing the role of the forgiving wife, but each smile was a step toward his downfall. Victoria's betrayal, James's weakness, and my calculated moves aligned perfectly. The stage was set for the next act. Carter Creative's office buzzed with energy, and the Seattle skyline supported my quiet takeover. I'd become acting CEO while James recovered my authority, unquestioned by the artists who now looked to me for guidance. The public still reeled from James's affair with Victoria Lane, the woman who'd crippled him, and I'd leveraged the scandal to paint myself as the wronged but resilient wife. But a new threat loomed. Someone inside the company leaked my plans to James, undermining my efforts to secure our artists' loyalty. The cosmic force that had reborn me for justice whispered a warning: find the traitor or lose everything. I'd noticed patterns. Deals I negotiated would fall through overnight, snatched by James's new agency, hastily formed with Victoria's help. He was undercutting my offers, targeting my clients with precision. Only someone close to me could know my moves so well. I suspected a mole, and I needed to flush them out. I devised a trap, planting false information about a high-profile script, a drama series I claimed was the next big thing. I mentioned it casually in a team meeting, watching faces for a tell. My assistant Lisa, a quiet woman I'd hired 2 years ago, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away. Suspicion took root. I stayed late at the office that night, sifting through Lisa's emails on a shared server. Buried in a deleted folder, I found messages to James detailing my negotiations, artist meetings, and even my praise for the fake script. "Emma's betting big on this one," she'd written. "You can steal it." My blood ran cold, but I kept my composure. The next morning, I called Lisa into my office, closing the door behind her. "Why, Lisa?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. She froze, her hands trembling. I didn't mean any harm," she stammered. "James promised me a promotion if I helped him." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "You betrayed me for him, after everything I've done for this team." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no pity. In my past life, James had used my trust to destroy me. I wouldn't let it happen again. You're fired, I said, my tone final. Pack your things and leave. She nodded, sobbing, and was gone by noon. The trap was set. James would chase the fake script, pouring his dwindling resources into a dead end. I'd make sure of it. Meanwhile, Carter Creative thrived under my leadership. Our top artist, Sean Miller, became a star after I cleared his name in the scandal. His gratitude cemented the loyalty of other artists who saw me as their protector. I met with them individually, promising better contracts and creative freedom. I told them, this company is yours as much as mine, and my sincerity is genuine but strategic. They believed in me, and that belief was power. I also contacted old contacts, directors, sponsors, even a retired producer I'd once wined and dined for James. They pledged their support, ensuring my deals were ironclad. James, still in the hospital, grew restless. During my visits, he'd pepper me with questions about the company, his voice laced with suspicion. How's the team holding up? He'd ask, his eyes searching mine. Better than ever, I'd reply, my smile disarming. He didn't know about Lisa, didn't know I'd rooted out his spy. He also didn't think I'd hired a private investigator to keep tabs on him and Victoria. Their affair continued, their messages filled with plans to oust me from Carter Creative. Victoria's texts were smug. We'll take it all once James returns. I saved every word, building my case. One evening, as I adjusted James's pillow, his phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. He snatched it away, but not before I glimpsed her name. Just a friend, he muttered, his eyes avoiding mine. I smiled, letting him think he'd fooled me. In my past life, he'd hidden his love for Victoria until after my death, raising a child he believed was his. I'd overheard her confession, the kid's not his, it's Mike's. That secret, combined with their affair, was a ticking bomb. I'd detonate it when the time was right. For now, I'd let James chase his doomed script, let Victoria think she was winning. The higher they climbed, the harder they'd fall. The Seattle air carried a crisp autumn bite as I stepped into the sleek offices of Carter Creative, my heels clicking with purpose on the polished floor. The city's skyline loomed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of the empire I'd built and was now fighting to keep. I, Emma Carter, had been reborn by a cosmic force for my sacrifice, granted a second chance to right the wrongs of my husband, James Carter, and his lover, Victoria Lane. With James's affair exposed, and our company's artists rallying behind me, I was ready for the final act in our shared drama, the divorce. The public saw me as the betrayed wife, a narrative I'd crafted with leaked photos of James and Victoria's motel tryst. Now I'd use that sympathy to secure my future. The office buzzed with tension as I prepared for a confrontation. James, discharged from the hospital, wheeled into Carter Creative's conference room, his face haggard but defiant. Victoria trailed behind her designer handbag, starkly contrasting her nervous eyes. The artists, including our star Sean Miller, stood at the edges, their loyalty to me palpable. I'd rooted out James's mole Lisa and set a trap with a fake script to ruin him financially. But today was about more than money, it was about justice. Emma, James began, his voice strained. We need to talk about the company. His eyes flicked to Victoria, who lifted her chin, emboldened by his presence. You've done enough damage, she snapped, tossing a bank card onto the table. Here's your $250,000 for the accident. Now leave. You're not his wife anymore. Her words were a dare, her smirk a challenge. I picked up the card, turning it over slowly. One night with my husband and you made $250,000, I said coolly. Impressive, Miss Lane. Victoria's face flushed, her composure cracking. What are you implying, she hissed. I didn't answer. Instead, I unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. The screen displayed a headline, Dance Instructor James Carter Cheats with Ex Who Crippled Him. Below is a photo of them kissing, one of many from my private investigator. Victoria stammered. It's fake, photoshopped. James in his wheelchair lunged forward. Emma, I was set up, he cried, his voice desperate. I slapped his hand away, my smile cold. Caught in bed and you're still lying. The room went silent. Sean stepped forward, his jaw tight. Emma stood by you, James. She kept this company alive while you were in the hospital, and this is how you repay her. Other artists murmured agreement, their eyes hard with disgust. James's face twisted, but Victoria wasn't done. Divorce him, Emma, she sneered. Take the money and get lost. I turned to James, my voice steady. You want a divorce, fine, but I own half this company. Buy me out or I'll take it all. James's eyes widened, but he nodded, his tone falsely conciliatory. Let's separate on good terms, Emma. I clutched my chest, letting tears spill for effect, my voice hoarse. Fine, I agree. Just get out of my sight. The artists watched their expressions shifting from curiosity to outrage. James's infidelity exposed in front of them sealed his fate. The public narrative was set: I was the wronged wife, he, the cheating scumbag. The divorce proceedings were swift. As the unfaithful party, James owed me half of Carter Creative's assets plus emotional damages. I also demanded the return of the $250,000 he'd given Victoria, citing it as marital property. The judge agreed, and I walked out of the courthouse with a divorce certificate and a fortune. That evening, I posted the certificate online, captioned, "Freedom tastes sweet." My media platform amplified the story, and gossip blogs dug into James and Victoria's affair. Their betrayal splashed across every screen in Seattle. Carter Creative's stock, James's half-plummeted billions vanishing as the public turned on him. I stood in my new office, a smaller space I'd leased for my agency, watching the city lights. The artists had followed me, and their loyalty was a testament to my leadership. Sean knocked on the door, his smile warm. "You did it, Emma. You're free." I nodded, my heart lighter but not yet whole. In my past life, James had used my death to build a life with Victoria, raising a child he thought was his. Her confession. The kid's not his. Its Mike's still burned in my memory. That secret would be my final blow, but for now, I'd won. James and Victoria were reeling, and I was just getting started. The Seattle winter settled in gray clouds, mirroring the storm I'd unleashed on James Carter and Victoria Lane. My new agency, Phoenix Rising, thrived with the artists who'd left Carter Creative to join me. Now a rising star, Sean Miller, led our roster, and his loyalty was a cornerstone of our success. I'd secured their trust by protecting Sean from a fabricated scandal, and now our projects were gaining traction. But James wasn't done. He waged war from his new, shoddily formed agency, stealing my deals maliciously. The cosmic force that reborn me for justice urged me to strike back, and I planned to bury him. James's tactics were desperate. He undercut my offers, poaching clients with prices no sane business could sustain. At a meeting with a major advertiser, the rep apologized, avoiding my eyes. "We went with Carter's agency. Their bid was half yours." Sean at my side clenched his fists. "They're playing dirty, Emma." I nodded, my smile calm. "Let them. They're digging their own grave." I'd already set my trap, planting false praise for a drama script I knew was doomed, a plagiarized work that would never air. I'd gushed about the script in a team meeting, calling it a game changer while watching for leaks. With Lisa the Mole gone, I'd ensured my words reached James through a trusted artist I'd briefed to play double agent. They told him that Emma was betting everything on this project, and he took the bait. James poured his agency's resources into the script, signing contracts smugly. I saw him waving a contract like a trophy at a networking event. "Sorry, Emma," he said, Victoria at his side, her eyes gleaming. "Looks like I snagged another one." Victoria couldn't resist piling on. "Your agency's struggling, Emma. This was your big hope. Gone now." I clenched my fists, playing the part of the defeated rival, but inside I was laughing. The script was based on a novel pulled for copyright violations. When filming wrapped, I leaked the truth to the press. The story exploded. Carter Agency sinks millions into plagiarized flop. James's company, already strained, collapsed under the debt. He and Victoria sold their downtown condo, moving into a rundown apartment in a seedy town. Meanwhile, Phoenix Rising soared. Sean's web drama, which James had mocked as bottom tier, became a viral hit, catapulting him to A-list status. His success drew opportunities for our other artists, their talent shining in bigger projects. I stood in my office, watching our stock rise on my tablet, starkly contrasting with James's ruin. My phone buzzed with a message from my private investigator, photos of Victoria at a gala, draped over a wealthy director, her hands on his neck. James was nowhere in sight. She'd already moved on, just as she had in my past life when her ex Mike proved more lucrative. I remembered her confession from my comatose state: "The kid's not his. It's Mike's." James still didn't know, but the truth was closing in. His desperation, her betrayal, it was all unfolding as I'd planned. I met Sean for coffee, his face lit with excitement over a new role. "You outsmarted them, Emma," he said, raising his cup. I smiled, my heart steady. "They thought they could break me. They were wrong." The cosmic force that brought me back hummed in my veins, urging me toward the final act. James's empire was dust, and Victoria's loyalty was a sham. Their fall was nearly complete. The Seattle winter cast a gray pall over the city, But my new agency, Phoenix Rising, shone like a beacon in the gloom. With Sean Miller's web drama a runaway hit, our artists were booking major projects, and my office buzzed with ambition. I, Emma Carter, had clawed my way back from the betrayal of my past life, reborn by a cosmic force that demanded justice for my sacrifice. James Carter, my ex-husband, and Victoria Lane, his lover, were crumbling. Their agency had gone bankrupt after James fell for my trap, a plagiarized script that drained their resources. Now I stood on the cusp of total victory, but the final act of their downfall was about to unfold in a way I hadn't anticipated. I attended a gala at a downtown Seattle hotel, a glittering event packed with industry elites. Phoenix Rising was sponsoring a showcase, and Sean, now a household name, mingled with directors, his charm effortless. I wore a sleek black dress, my confidence a quiet armor. As I sipped champagne, my eyes caught a jarring sight: Victoria draped over a man old enough to be her grandfather, her delicate hands wrapped around his neck as she kissed him openly. Director Harold Wong was a known power player, and his wealth was a magnet for opportunists like her. Sean at my side frowned. "Isn't she with James? Who's that guy?" I shook my head, a bitter smile forming. "Victoria's faithful to form, always chasing the next big wallet. She'd done the same in my past life, abandoning James for a tech mogul before returning when her prospects dimmed. I'd overheard her confession during my coma. The kid's not his, it's Mike's. She'd let James raise another man's child, a secret that fueled my revenge. Now she'd jumped ship again, leaving James to drown in his debts." I turned to leave, uninterested in her spectacle, when a commotion erupted. James wheeled himself across the room, his face a mask of rage. His wheelchair squeaked, drawing eyes as he reached Victoria. "You bitch," he shouted, his hand cracking across her face. The slap echoed, silencing the crowd. Victoria shrieked, her heel lashing out, catching his wheelchair and toppling it. James hit the floor with a crash, his hands scrabbling for purchase. "You think a disabled person can hit me?" she sneered, grinding her stiletto into his fingers. James howled, curling into himself as blood seeped from his crushed hand. "I gave up everything for you," he gasped, his eyes wild with betrayal. "How could you? Did I ask you to leave her?" Victoria snapped, her voice venomous. "You're useless, James. A broke, legless nobody." She kicked him again, her heel catching his ribs. He slammed into a table, his head striking the edge with a sickening thud. Blood streamed down his face, pooling on the polished floor. The crowd gasped, some reaching for their phones, others frozen in shock. Victoria didn't spare him a glance. She wiped her hands as if touching him disgusted her and sauntered off, with Wong heading for the hotel across the street. The club manager, fearing a lawsuit, called 911. Paramedics rushed James to the hospital, his body limp, his face a mask of defeat. Sean, still beside me, shook his head. "Serves him right. He had you, Emma, and chose her." I nodded, my heart a mix of satisfaction and something heavier, pity perhaps, for the man who'd thrown away 2 lives for a lie. Victoria's betrayal was no surprise. She'd done it before in my past life, when she'd conspired with James to pull my oxygen tube. Now she'd discarded him as easily as she'd discarded me. But James wasn't done yet, and neither was I. The cosmic force that brought me back hummed in my veins, urging me to see this through. I returned to my office, the gala's chaos replaying in my mind. My private investigator sent an update. Victoria was already flaunting her new relationship with Wong, while James, hospitalized, again faced mounting debts from loan sharks. His attempt to rebuild his agency had failed, each investment a flop. Victoria's abandonment was the final nail, but I knew James's desperation could make him dangerous. I tightened security at Phoenix Rising, ensuring my artists and I were protected. The child's paternity, Victoria's secret, loomed in my thoughts. I'd use it to shatter James completely, but first I'd let him stew in his ruin. The Seattle spring brought a tentative warmth, sun breaking through the clouds as Phoenix Rising soared. My agency was a powerhouse, our artists headlining projects across the country, Sean Miller's fame, a rising tide lifting us all. I, Emma Carter, had rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal, reborn by a cosmic force that demanded justice for my sacrifice. James Carter and Victoria Lane were shadows of their former selves, their lives unraveling as I'd planned. But the final reckoning awaited, and it would be more brutal than I'd imagined. One night, as I stepped out of my car after a late meeting, I saw James waiting under a street lamp, his wheelchair glinting in the moonlight. His head was bandaged from the gala incident, his face pale and drawn. "Emma," he croaked, his voice trembling. "I was wrong. I messed up everything. Tears streamed down his cheeks, his hands slapping his own face in a frantic rhythm. I had the perfect wife and threw her away for that snake. Sean, who'd driven me home, stepped in front of me, his stance protective. "You're not welcome here, James," he said coldly. I touched Sean's arm, my voice calm. "Let me talk to him." Sean frowned but stepped aside, his eyes wary. James's gaze locked onto mine, desperate like a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. "Emma, I love you. I always did. Victoria fooled me, but you were my everything." His words were a plea, but they fell flat. I pulled my hand away as he reached for me, my voice icy. "Please don't call me that. You don't deserve my name." His face crumpled, but I wasn't done. "You want to explain your affair? Go ahead. Tell me why." He flinched, his voice breaking. "In our last life, you were in a coma for 3 years. Victoria was there, helping me through it. I thought she cared." He paused, his eyes wild. "I was reborn, Emma. I know it sounds wild, but it's true." I leaned closer, my smile sharp. "I believe you, James." Because I was reborn too, his pupils dilated, his breath catching as the truth hit him. "The Emma who loved you," I continued, "died when you pulled my oxygen tube. You killed me, James, and you chose Victoria in 2 lifetimes." His face drained of color, his mouth opening soundlessly. I pressed on my voice laced with venom. "And that child you raised with her, it wasn't yours. It was Mike's, her ex. She admitted it while I was in a coma. She lied to you, used you just like you used me." James's hands shook, his voice a whisper. "No, that's not true." But doubt flickered in his eyes, the truth sinking in. "I said she got scared when the kid didn't look like you. That's why she and her ex drugged you, staged that drowning accident. You were nothing to her." James burst into hysterical laughter, his voice raw. "Of course. That day I was so dizzy. That evil woman." He clutched his head, his laughter turning to sobs. I stepped back, watching him unravel. The cosmic force that brought me back pulsed with satisfaction. This was justice, clean and sharp. The next morning, James vanished into the city's underbelly. 2 months later, a fisherman found a woman's body near a reservoir outside Seattle. The corpse, waterlogged and pale, was Victoria Lane's. Her face, once beautiful, was slashed beyond recognition, her tongue cut out a gruesome end. Police arrested James soon after, his wild laughter filling the news footage. "She deserved it," he shouted to the cameras. "She ruined my life." He showed no remorse, his mind broken by betrayal. I watched the report from my office, a strange mix of pity and disgust stirring in me. He'd lived 2 lives, only realizing who'd truly loved him at the end. Too late. I turned to my own healing. Therapy sessions helped me unpack the pain of James's betrayal, the weight of my past life. I formed new friendships, joined a book club, and found joy in small moments, a coffee with Sean, a walk through Pike Place Market. When Sean confessed his feelings, I smiled gently. I said, "You're like a brother to me," and he nodded, understanding. Phoenix Rising thrived, and our artists are shining brighter than ever. I stood by my office window, gazing at the sunlit sound of sunflowers blooming in a nearby park. My future was bright, unshadowed by James or Victoria. It had only just begun.